What's up, kids? Mr. B here. We are going to take a break from science because my goodness gracious, have you guys been working so hard over the past few days in science. I'm going to give us a little bit of a break here. It is Friday, and because it's Friday, that means our class is a little bit shorter, especially some of us, if we're not starting off in the classroom, it's definitely a little bit shorter with our rotation schedule, the way things go. So we're going to cover a little bit about the beginnings of the Revolutionary War. We're going to pick up with some of the stuff that we've already covered and talk about that again, because you will have to put some of that in your assignment for today. And after you get done watching this video and the other videos that accompany this, you're going to go through a Google Jamboard and do the different assignments on the different pages. And when you get done with those pages, pretty certain the class will be over. I've tried to do this assignment and I cannot get it done, all of it, in an hour, but I know some of us tend to rush through things a little bit faster than we should. So we'll have to make sure that those folks aren't rushing too much. That's why I put a little bit extra in there. So we're not going to sit here and stress if we don't get every little bit done, but we are going to get as much as we can done and do it to the best of our 5th grade ability. So Revolutionary War is right around the corner. We've seen the build up to the Revolutionary War, going all the way back to when the colonists, right after that French and Indian War, and they were having to start pay these taxes. And the colonists were like, I don't know if I like this or not. Paying taxes, I think it's garbage. And I think it's garbage because there's no representation. And most of us put that in our Boston Tea Party videos, no taxation without representation. And I think that's an important thing to understand. And we've talked about this before, how had both sides actually kind of come together, like if you really listen, the English wanted them to pay taxes, the colonists just wanted representation. Had they actually sat and listened to each other and compromised, then again, we might have tea time at Old Friendship Elementary. And it would be a little bit different with the way things are being ran. We'd have a queen right now. And so it's very odd to look back. It's also very easy to look back and say that, they should have talked it out and compromised. So I think we've all been in situations where had we slowed down and talked about things, the outcome probably would have been a little bit different. So Boston Tea Party goes down. We're all familiar with that. You guys crushed that unit. And Parliament is they're still not listening. They're not giving them any representation. And it's kind of odd. Some of the colonists and some of the leaders are like, man, like that might have been a little overboard by the old Sons of Liberty there. So we should probably pay for that tea. I think if we pay for the tea, that would be the fair thing to do. And so they offered to pay for the tea. And this is such a weird thing. Parliament said, no, you're not going to pay for the tea. We're going to enact even more laws and acts. And they were labeled the intolerable acts because they were not tolerable. One part of the law allowed British troops to stay in your home whenever and wherever they wanted. It did not matter. They didn't have to give you like any kind of a reservation or anything. It wasn't like Verbo or anything. Like when you knew people were staying, they could just knock on the door at any time, wherever they wanted. And the law said that they were allowed to pretty much take over your home. And that one's kind of wild. This one makes absolutely no sense to me. They closed the Boston Harbor until the tea was paid for. Hello, that's exactly what they were asking to do, but you told them no. That one still kills me. And it banned the committees of correspondence. And let's talk about these committees of correspondence. The committees of correspondence, obviously we've said this, there was no emailing, texting, phone calling, FaceTiming, none of that. So they wrote letters. And what they did is they wrote letters back and forth to each other, complaining about the British government. Crazy thing is, and when you're disparaging the British government, that was actually illegal under Britain's law. But I don't think the colonists cared. These are the same people that painted people's house with poop and threw tea in a harbor. So breaking the law is not a huge deal to them, especially if it's just writing letters. But these letters got extremely popular, and there began to be a very large group of people passing these letters back and forth and they would share them with their friends and neighbors, and everybody would kind of put their thoughts and feelings on that. And we'll have to look. I wonder if there's any copies of those anywhere. I'm like in the middle of teaching this, and this popped in my head. I'm going to look that up as soon as I get done doing this. Maybe we can spend the day looking at that. That would be fun. But they wrote them back and forth, and obviously, I mean, we know that Britain did not like this. So these committees started forming everywhere. And again, like, you weren't allowed to criticize the British at all. You weren't allowed to say anything bad about them. Whether it was true or not, it didn't matter. And so the colonists had realized that there were so many people that didn't like Britain that they needed to hold a meeting. And so representatives from all of the colonies except for Georgia got together. Now, we talked about why Georgia didn't get together. And it was actually, I mean, let's be honest, fairly smart on Georgia's part. At that time, there was some Native American uprisings going on in Georgia. And Georgia was thinking, man, I don't know if we have the manpower to handle this. If we have to ask, Britain for help, but we're over here hanging out this Continental Congress, they're going to tell us no. And they're correct. They would have told them no. So they stayed out of it. So they could at least be like, nah, we're not a part of that. So they could get help if they needed it. But everyone got together at this first Continental Congress. And this was kind of the beginning of, hey, guys, like, why don't we think about separating and just kind of being on our own? We're doing it anyway. I mean, they're over there and we're over here. So I think we can do this. Obviously, Parliament was not happy. And instead of repealing the Intolerable Acts, they added even more laws, which put more limits on what the colonists could do. It put more restrictions on their trade, obviously forced the colonists to do more things with smugglers. And what Britain did in response to that, to try to help enforce some of these laws, is they sent even more soldiers to the colonists. So the colonists know that there's, they start to realize more soldiers are coming and more soldiers are showing up, and they're kind of understanding what the British are doing. So in response to that, they started building up a militia and people called Minutemen. And these Minutemen were people that could fight at a minute's notice. Basically like, hey, we need you. And they could come running out the door with their gun ready to roll. These militias were very important to the colonists because they thought that was going to be the way that they could protect what they viewed as their freedoms and what they viewed as their rights as colonists. And again, I think they had gotten to the point of they were so fed up of no representation, they were ready to fight over it. So they were militia and Minutemen. And then that takes us into good old Paul Revere. And I know that most of us know a little bit about Paul Revere. And again, some of these facts you don't have to memorize, like when he was born in 1734 in Boston. It's interesting. His dad was a silversmith, so shocker at that time. Guess what Paul became? A silversmith, because you pretty much did what your parents did. As he grew up, he became active in the Sons of Liberty. So we already know one thing about Paul Revere. He definitely wasn't afraid to cause trouble and get into things that maybe were a little bit overboard sometimes. There are other members of the Sons of Liberty: John Adams, John Hancock, Patrick Henry, Sam Adams, and you start to see some names on here that really were influential in the founding of the United States. We know that he was involved in the Boston Tea Party to an extent, and then he might have actually been at least at the Boston Massacre. Obviously, he wasn't yelling, "Shoot me," and got shot, or he wouldn't have been able to do what he did. But it's kind of wild to think of all the places that good old Paul Revere was before he gets to what he was most famous for. So in April 1775, the British Army was in Boston and other places, and there were these rumors going around that the British Army was going to start searching places and seizing weapons, and they were going to start finding the leaders of the Sons of Liberty and arrest them, probably kill them. And so obviously these Sons of Liberty were watching things pretty closely. And they wanted to make sure that they could get the word out to everyone should the British make this first move. And they had a few things set up that they were going to do. And so there were two people that were going to run out and warn Sam Adams and John Hancock. And it was Paul Revere was one of those. And what he did is he was supposed to go across the Charles River to Charleston and then to Lexington. And William Dawes was the other rider. He had a different route that he would go on. And basically what they were going to do is go and let everybody know, hey, the British are coming. They're going to start searching and seizing and arresting. It's now's that time. Remember those, you need to be ready to fight in a minute. Yeah, you got a minute. So go ahead and get your stuff ready because it's time to throw down. Is pretty much what was going on here. He was letting people know it's time. There was a second warning system that Paul Revere had put in place in case the riders did not make it. Robert Newman was to put lanterns in the steeple of the Old North Church. And I love this part because it's actually in one of my favorite movies with Nicolas Cage, National Treasure. They talk about this a little bit. And so he would put one lantern in the window if the British were coming by land, and he would put two if they were coming by sea, quote unquote sea, the rivers. And so this is where you hear that famous phrase, one if by land, two if by sea. And I'm pretty certain if you go and you see anything up in Boston and these areas, you probably would see, and it says so here in the notes, that the Paul Revere statue has that written on it in front of the Old North Church. I got to make it up there to do that. I want to see all that stuff. I think that'd be really awesome to see. But on the night of April 18th and the next day of the 19th in 1775, the British actually started to make their move. So everybody, got to work, and they started to do exactly what they said they were going to do. And so they were coming down the Charles River, like quote unquote by sea. So the riders went out, and that's where you hear about Paul Revere riding on horseback. It's so odd we don't hear about our other person. You don't hear a lot about William Dawes. It's all about Paul Revere screaming, "The British are coming! The British are coming!" But this is an important fact. And as these British are coming, and these Minutemen and militiamen were able to get together so quickly, we're soon going to get to some confrontations that were pretty much going to be the very beginning of the Revolutionary War. So I hope you've got all of these notes taken down, and we will use these notes as we move forward through this. So as we head out, just for my buddy Hunter, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe and enjoy the music, because you'll be hearing it again very soon.